Hi, so today we're going to be looking at intensive farming. And the main gist of this is that we've got an awful lot of people on this planet to feed. So farmers, of course, try to maximise the amount of energy that gets to the end of the food chain. So we'll look at the ways they do that. Of course, this does have an impact on the environment and animal welfare, so we'll look at those too. So this is all based around this section of your iBook. So it's called intensive farming because we try and get the amount of energy, so the maximum amount of energy to the end of the food chain. So we'll look at techniques for that. So we've already covered why we restrict the movement of animals, keeping them indoors, etc. So we'll look at some other issues with that. So you should be well placed to think about the film that we watched for the ethical issues for the egg production there. So what we're going to look at, one of the main things that we're going to look at is, let's go back to this a sec. So here's our food chain. Obviously we've got the sun, we're growing in this case corn, and we're feeding it to chickens, and the chickens or the eggs are being fed to the humans. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the use of pesticides. So this is referred to as chemical control, and basically icide at the end of a word means killing. So herbicides kill plants, fungicides, fungi, etc., etc. So let's have a look at the issues with that. Okay, so as I said, a wide variety of pesticides are used to make sure that the crops aren't eaten and the energy gets to the humans there. So you can see various types of icides. So insecticides, slugs and snails would be molluscicides, and herbicides, which of course controlling the weeds which are competing with the crop plants for, as we can see, light, water, etc. So here's our food chain, and the problem that we have is that the animal doesn't get a lethal dose, gets eaten, and the pesticide moves along the food chain. And of course, if we're looking at a farming food chain, there's a risk that the pesticide could end up in humans as well. So let's have a look at the pests being sprayed, eaten by spiders, and then we have a bird eating the spiders. And if we imagine that we had 20 units of pesticide in the insects, as we know, pyramids of biomass get smaller as you go up through the food chain, but the pesticide persists. So what we see is we get the same amount of pesticide but in a smaller amount of biomass, so it's getting more and more concentrated as you go up the food chain because there's less biomass there. And this caused real problems in the past. The use of DDT, which was an insecticide used an awful lot in the 1950s, moved up through the food chain and in particular affected birds of prey at the top of the food chain, and they were so poisoned that their eggs weren't able to form hard shells around them. So this is why things like the red kite went into such a massive decline and is only just recovering now. Right, another problem that we have is for spraying these icides, and they kill other organisms apart from the pest. So ladybirds, we all love ladybirds, gardeners especially, because they eat hundreds and hundreds of greenfly a day. We all know about the problems with the fall in the bee population. So this is what I talked about with the moving up, and we call this bioaccumulation. So as we saw the pyramid there. This is first sort of worked out after a fishing community in Japan were dying from mercury poisoning. And there was a local factory releasing the mercury pollutants into the water. These were then accumulating in the plankton, which are eaten by the small fish and the bigger fish, and then eventually by the Japanese fishermen. And as we can see, by the time it gets to the top of that food chain, it is very, very concentrated as well. Another problem that we have is that farm animals are often treated with antibiotics, and we all know the problem about the overuse of antibiotics leading to resistance. So if we've got an ill chicken here, eventually it feels symptoms and the farmer treats it with an antibiotic. This kills most of the bacteria off. However, if a mutation occurs and one is able to survive, then it's going to reproduce, and eventually all of the bacteria are going to be resistant. So let's have a look back to this food chain. Oops, this food chain here. Right, apologies for the drawing, but what we can see, first off, A is representing the use of herbicides to control weeds, which are stopping the crop plants from getting water and minerals from the soil, etc. Here we've got the use of fertilizers to increase the growth of the crops, and without the use of fertilizers we wouldn't be able to produce anywhere near the amounts of food that we are able to. NPK represents the most common elements that are needed, so nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, which in separate science we'll cover later on in the course what the plant uses these for. C is representing a pest which is eating the crop, so if farmer controls the pest it will make sure that there's more crop to be fed to the chickens. So D is about the respiration, so by reducing the movement, etc., which we've already covered. E is the, again, pest control, preventing food going there, and F is the use of antibiotics to promote the health of the plant. So on this PowerPoint, what I'd basically like you to do is to produce a diagram like this and to explain it using the points that I've got here. This is a key word to use. Yield is the useful part of the plant there. And I've just here listed the sort of things that you should cover in the intensive farming bit. So what I want from you is a diagram like so, explanations like that, and then you're going to take that, and what I want you to do is to compare organic and intensive farming, how the food produced, and in particular if you could do like a table to contrast the way that the differences between them. For example, minerals in an intensive farm would be chemically produced, whereas on an organic farm they would use manures, etc., much greener ways. So controlling pests using chemical control here, and what we'll go on to look at in year 11 is how biological control can be used as well there. So again, chemical control here, herbicides compared to hand weeding, etc., like that. Okay, so use that as a source, and of course other source, and this is the a list of terms that I would like to make sure that you include in your work. Okay, so I think that's it. I will add the detail onto Google Classroom and put copies of these presentations as well, but you've got you do have everything in your iBook as well, so you have that presentation there. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks to those that have sent work in already. I shall give you some more feedback. Please remember to keep taking photos and uploading it so that I can give you feedback. Thank you.